Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with Dr. Jessie Mahoney.
And Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are physicians and leaders who are also trained in coaching, yoga, mindfulness, and integrative medicine.
We are also mothers, spouses, sisters, daughters, aunts, and friends.
In this podcast, we share candid, heart-centered, loving, science-based, thoughtful, and often fun conversations about the challenges life throws at us.
With our collective experience of over 30 years in physician and personal wellness, we reflect and offer pearls of wisdom for navigating life's challenges with more ease.
From parenting, marriages, money scarcity, cancer survivorship, uncertainty, challenges in practicing medicine, we cover it all.
We invite you to refresh your perspective and empower yourself with mindset, mindfulness, and other well-being tools that actually work. A quick reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice.
And this topic has bubbled up to the surface and is inspired by the fact that I get so many questions of people who come to me thinking they might want to get coached, but they're really worried that it won't work for them. It works for other people, but they have some either particular problem or a particular way of thinking and it won't work for them. Or they have tried and nothing has worked. Or maybe they've even done coaching and maybe they got some level of change and then it didn't stick and they don't know why it didn't stick and they're sort of back to their old habits. Many people come thinking there's a right or a wrong way to do it. And that there's also a right time to do it. And is this the right time? And if they make a mistake along the way, something terrible will happen. And so people come with all of these questions. And so I wanted to dispel some of those thoughts and perhaps what I'll frame as unhelpful thought patterns and give you some hope and some tips and things that I think actually will change that thinking, because I know and believe that it's possible for everyone to change. But you need to set yourself up for change and you need to have a change mindset. I always talk about body, mind, and spirit. So your body needs to be able to change. In other words, a healthy nervous system. And you need to not be depleted. You can't change on empty. And then you need very specific mindset patterns, knowing what your defaults are and knowing where they get in your way so that you can skip them. So I'm hoping that by the end, you will have a better insight as to why change is hard for you in particular. And you, by you, I mean generally high achievers or people in healthcare. And also most of the people who come to work with me are women, not all, but these things are harder for women. And then maybe why it hasn't worked for you in the past. Some people have changed, but they didn't end up where they wanted. They keep changing things outside of themselves. So what can you do to help yourself with that? And maybe something that you want to try. And then the last piece that I hope you'll leave with is an idea of how you can support yourself well. Because in medicine, we generally don't support ourselves. We think that getting support and help is weak and that we should do it all ourselves. And I absolutely thought that initially. And now I support myself super well. In fact, that is absolutely one of the most important prerequisites for change. Why change is hard for people like us is that when you are successful, it's actually harder to change, because when you change, you actually have to change. So you have to give up things that you are already good at and give up identities that you have as perhaps a physician. For me, I had a panel that I had for many, many years. You have to give that up to do something different. And yet many of us would like to keep that too. We'd also like to keep maybe the health insurance and the other benefits. And it's the more you have, or the more success that you have, or even perceived success, it's harder to make a change. We are also experts at catastrophizing and focusing on the negative. So it's harder for us to change. We were trained to think that way in medicine, and we bring that mindset to change. And as a former site chief in pediatrics, that is one of the problems in most of our physician meetings, is that people catastrophize and think about worst case scenarios when we're thinking about changing the call schedule or changing the way we do the vacations or changing the way our patients get school forms. This negativity bias and catastrophizing keeps us from making changes. Also focusing on those negative what ifs, what negative thing could happen. And I know some of you are thinking about making change and your brain is going to auto go to the negative. And so there are things you can do to set yourself up to notice those positives. We are trained to not like uncertainty in medicine. In fact, many of us picked medicine because you do X, you do Y, you do Z, and change involves, and transformation involves uncertainty. If you're going to become someone different, that is uncertain. And so we think uncertainty is dangerous or potentially negative, and yet it can very much be better. And in my case, change and transformation has led to a lot better than I anticipated. But that is not the way that our brain thinks when you embark on it. Most of us also don't want to make a mistake. We're trained to think mistakes are dangerous, and we don't want to disappoint people, and we are generally people pleasers. And so change is more challenging if that is your default mindset. We also have this mindset that I often talk about a lot, over responsibility. And so we take responsibility for our patients or our colleagues, for all of medicine itself and what happens to it. And so we tend to not focus on what's good for us, but we take responsibility for how our decisions will impact everybody and everything, even though we don't actually know how that will happen. And it might just turn out better than you think also. And then the last thing that really gets in the way of change is anxiety and discomfort. And when we are anxious or uncomfortable, we think something bad will happen. That's how we were trained to think in medicine. And so when you embark on change, you are 100% anxious and uncomfortable. And so then our brain is like, this is a bad idea. Let me go back to my old thinking. And so realizing that anxiety and discomfort just mean you're doing something unfamiliar. It doesn't mean it's dangerous. But your old patterning is going to tell you that. We also have a very strong scarcity mindset, which as I mentioned, I'll talk more about in the next session that I'm going to do. But we think there's a limited number of good outcomes. And so we have to pick the one instead of thinking there might be 15 different ways of changing yourself that would make things better. When I graduated, we're very much taught that we were lucky to have a job and we should feel grateful for the opportunity to do whatever we're doing. And that gets in the way of thinking, well, I might like to do something different, or I have personal desires. And so we're very much in this gratitude debt obligation, and we did this training, and so we're supposed to do this. And so that gets in the way of making change, even though for many people, change actually allows them to show up and contribute more fully and make more impact on the world. But it's hard for us to get there. Today, I really wanted to focus on these prerequisites for change, or what you need to have effective change and to make it stick. And that is not willpower. That is not pushing harder or trying harder, which is what most of us were trained to do. The first thing that I think you need is you have to actually really want to change. So many of us want things around us to change or things to feel better, but we don't actually want to change. And it's hard to change if you don't actually want to change yourself and you don't have a desire. We also have to be willing to change ourselves. We have to know to some degree what we want. We have to trust ourselves and believe in ourselves and trust the process and believe in the process of change. And then we have to practice a couple of things that many of us haven't practiced. So we have to practice energy management, and then this nervous system management I mentioned, and then kindness and self-compassion, or at least neutrality and acceptance. But we can't change from hating ourselves and being mean to ourselves and judging ourselves and feeling like we're doing things wrong. Nobody changes from that. Now, sometimes we change in the short term, but we always default back. So to have change integrate and to stay, you have to create this environment where change is welcome and you are safe to make change. And so that requires the nervous system. It requires the kindness. It requires energy. It requires support and having soft places to land and safe places in community and or a person to support you well. And then a willingness to practice and a willingness to let it take time. We are all very urgent. We want to make the change, have the change happen and feel better right away. We were trained to have an urgency bias. And so realizing that change is not necessarily a quick overnight thing, it takes time. Truly wanting change and actually truly wanting change takes this slowing down, which many of us don't do, and connecting with what you really want. And many of us don't know how to do that and haven't ever done that. So I often teach hand to heart. And I know for a few of you who are here who've perhaps been to Sagrada, like when you are there and you are slowing down at a retreat, you actually begin to see what you really want. But sometimes in the rapidity and just busyness of the day-to-day, we don't know. We were also taught not to listen and not to feel in medicine. And so we often haven't listened in a long time to what we want. And it wasn't important. If you have a bunch of children and a bunch of patients and a bunch of colleagues and all kinds of other things pulling at you, it's very hard to pause long enough to even know. Taking the time to figure out what you actually truly want and allowing that it's okay to want something is also part of it. So truly wanting it, allowing yourself to want it is the first piece. And then being willing to change, meaning the system doesn't have to change and other people don't have to change. And realizing that when we change ourselves, which is really all that's in our control, everything around us actually does change. But changing ourselves is really what's in our control. Even if you think about like the broken medical system, well, we'd like it to change and it will someday, but it's also not in our control for the most part. And when we are not in our most empowered state, just wishing for it to change, even the things that change don't really help us because we're in that victim mentality. And so deciding that you're not a victim and you're going to change yourself and you're going to focus on what's in your control is how you get to change that actually happens and actually sticks. And then intention. And so an intention in change, we often just want change. We have an idea of something out there that will be better. But being very specific about your intention. So it's setting intentions, and I call them intentions and not goals because those are outcome based, but it's really just directing where you want to go, how you want to feel in life, what you want more of or less of. And without an intention or direction, you end up either random or generally our brain also defaults to the negative. And so we tend to go back to those negativity bias, the negative thoughts, why it won't work. So you want to give your brain somewhere to focus and somewhere to end up so that like if you have no GPS, who knows where you end up. And so when you set your mind to something, what you pay attention to is what you experience. And that intention helps you move towards something rather than just running away from something. There's also a lot of science around intentions, and intentions themselves release dopamine and acetylcholine, which provide motivation and focus and attention. And so just by setting them, you get some benefit. Belief and trust is the next one. And we were trained not to trust, actually. We were trained not to trust ourselves, trust and confirm other people. And so believing in yourself and trusting the process is very hard for many of us. And yet, if you are going to actually transform, you have to believe that you can. I think in the beginning, you often need to believe in borrow someone else's belief. And when I made my change, I borrowed my family's belief. They believed in me way more than me. And so you just borrow it from whoever believes in you. It's not that you don't, but you have this underlying self-doubt, which was always raised in medicine. Like, what might you not know? What might people discover? What terrible thing? And so we just get caught up in not trusting ourselves and worrying that mistakes are dangerous. And so I think that just growing that belief and trust, it takes tremendous practice. And you also have to believe and trust the process. And it's just a choice to decide that you're going to do that. But it's a conscious choice that if you are doubting it the whole way, you're doubting every step that you've made and you don't have your back along the way. And then you tend to go backwards because you're like, well, what if I had done that? What if I had done this? Then you're not taking the steps that you need to get to the next step and to get to the next step. And there's a lot of work you can do in coaching about having your own back and what that means. And for me, that was the thing that helped me shift gears and move into the things I really wanted to be doing at this point in my life, was the ability to have my own back. And I didn't even know what that was before coaching. And I never had it, as it turns out. It was always like looking for external validation and looking for other signs that I had made the right choice. And then really not having my own back by regret and wondering if I had made that choice, what would happen? That is not an effective way to actually make change and have it stick. So then comes this practicing energy management, nervous system management, and what I call kindness and self-compassion. And those are the three things that I think, even within coaching, that many times we miss, and it slows down change and transformation and often undoes it. And the rationale here is that if you are an empty or totally depleted, nobody can change well from there. It's a little bit like your well-being is threatened. We don't make change and trust and step into new things and grow courage from a place of complete depletion. So many people in medicine are trying to change because they're burnt out. But I believe you have to actually do some of that work to replete yourself. So that's one of the primary intentions around the Sagrada Retreat. And I think why some of you who have been are like, wow, why does it work so well? That's why. It's very intentional to nourish and nurture yourself. And I would say in all the ways. Now, you can do this at home, but it has to be very intentional along the way. So finding things that replete your energy. When you're low on energy, that's not when you remember what makes you feel better and what gives you energy. And so connecting with what things deplete you and what things energize you can be really helpful. And also connecting to those things that in the short term feel good, like Facebook and chocolate. And those are the two that come to mind. Shopping. They feel good in the short term, but they don't feel good in the long term. They are actually depleting your energy, not growing your energy. And so you want to be clear about what is actually increasing your energy. And then the nervous system management is why I bring mindfulness into, is one of the reasons why I bring mindfulness into coaching. Because you can't change when your nervous system is in sympathomimetic storm, or you're threatened, or you're in fight or flight. Nobody is willing to change the way they think and to mix things up. And nobody's particularly courageous. We're actually just reactive. We might feel courageous when we run away from the tiger, but we're really just reacting. And so that is a place where you might get quick change, but it doesn't stick. And so practicing you upregulating your parasympathetic nervous system with mindfulness, with yoga, with nature, there's so many things that do it. You have to figure out what works for you. It is one of the primary reasons why I teach yoga and offer coaching in my yoga, and that I blend these two things, because if you have a barely functioning parasympathetic nervous system, which most of us have, it's very hard to change. Your body's just going to be resistant and it won't stick. Whatever you do comes as a reaction. And you have to know what calm feels like. So this is one of those things that you really have to practice. And one of the things that I teach so often is what you practice grows. You have to practice evening out your nervous system. You have to practice calm. It is not natural. Most of us don't spend our lives there. And so it's something that you actually need to spend time doing so it can help you when you need it. Similarly, practicing kindness and self-compassion. And most of us are generally mean to ourselves. And we have approached change or approached to getting through medical school and residency by being mean and working harder and saying not nice things. You might get in trouble, and what happens if you don't know this, and looking at what we do wrong and judging ourselves all the time and using that as a way to move forward. And while it does work in the short term, it's more of a willpower approach, and we run out of willpower. And so to me, you have to change, not from a place of being mean to yourself, but from a place of kindness, from a place of self-compassion, which for many of us is a journey to get to. So at least don't be mean to yourself, and then keep going from there. There are other paths, like neutral, I think, is an amazing way forward, and acceptance. And so in the midst of trying to transform yourself or your life, you're going to need different ones of these at different times. And so sort of learning what they look like and feel like and where you can find them and what questions you need to ask is a really useful tool. From that place of kindness and self-compassion and neutrality, that's where you get creative, you get curious. That's where you can be more flexible and like navigate the choppy waters. Without that, you really don't navigate the choppy waters particularly well. So you need them. Shauna Shapiro talks about self-compassion as a life raft in stormy times. And that's how I like to think about it. And all change and all transition is stormy. And it takes a lot of courage, which is stormy. The other things I had mentioned were supporting yourself well and I know that I thought I could figure it out myself. I'd figured out all this other stuff myself. Why didn't I just figure that out too? And I think that supporting yourself well is one of the kindest things that you can do, to have either a group space that is supportive, or a person, somebody there who's with you on the journey. Change and transforming is not an easy journey. We'd like it to be easy, but if it were easy, we would have all changed and all done it already. And so finding that space and the tools to support yourself, whether it's energy management, nervous system management, mindset management, it's all the things. And then the last thing is accepting that it takes time and it takes practice. So I mentioned that urgency bias. We just want to change. I often talk about baking rather than microwaving. When you microwave something, it doesn't taste as good. When you bake it and it all seeps together, that's where the change sticks. So you can change overnight and think, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But where you really get the benefit is when you take the time and you invest the time in changing, and you change maybe 1%, 5%. You don't just blow it all up overnight. Now, some of the changes are big changes that you kind of have to decide you're going to switch jobs or you're going to move. But you even get to that slowly. You're not running away from something, you're moving towards something, you have intention, you have all these resources, and you do it over time. Then the change will stick. And that might seem discouraging, but if you change 1%, 5% over time, you end up actually getting farther than this rapid race ahead and then coming backwards, and race ahead and going backwards. So in my experience, investing the time in the change and letting it take the time that it needs is where you will end up somewhere very different than where you are today. And hopefully somewhere that you want to end up, because you've set your intentions. As per usual, we will end with a few reflection questions. Do you want to change? Is there something you want to be moving towards? Perhaps it's a feeling. Do you believe in yourself? Do you trust yourself? Do you need to replete yourself? Is it possible there is not a right and wrong way to go about changing, and there is not a right or wrong time to change? What if now is the time for change? Thanks so much for joining me today. We very much appreciate that you choose to listen to the Mindful Healers podcast. We know your attention is valuable. Our intention is to make listening valuable. Please share the podcast with friends, colleagues, and family who might find it valuable as well. And if you want to make change, join me for Ongoing Presence, which begins shortly, or Transition Well, it's not too late, and or for intensive coaching at a retreat. I would love to meet you. May you all have a beautiful day. See you next week.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We encourage you to dive into the show notes for each episode for more learnings and resources.
We also invite you to take a listen to the many other Mindful Healers podcast episodes, and please share the podcast far and wide with colleagues, friends, and family.
If our message and approach resonate with you, we would love to work with you.
When you listen to a podcast, you consume information, but when you work with us, you can actually practice and change.
We offer coaching and mindfulness experiences, talks, workshops, retreats, and more. Connect with us at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
The content of this podcast is not medical or life advice. We invite you to participate in the mindful moments we offer at the end of most of our podcasts, but please only do so safely.
Welcome to today's mindful moment. What
is required for change. Taking a moment to find your sit bones and reconnect to the earth beneath you. If you're standing, notice the soles of your feet on the earth. If you're sitting, connect to the firmness and the stability, what's holding you, keeping you safe. If it's safe to do so, close your eyes. And if it's safe to do so, bring a hand to heart. Connecting with yourself is essential for change. Taking a moment to connect with your breath. Noticing hand on hand, hand on heart. Noticing your breath. Noticing how you feel. Feeling safe and secure is important to be able to change. Connecting with safety, connecting with feeling grounded, finding your center. What might it look and feel like to find your center today? Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Enjoying perhaps feeling centered, connecting with what feeling centered feels like. Noticing your hand connecting to your heart, letting that sense of connection and safety support you and buoy you. And noticing how your nervous system feels. A calm nervous system is also essential for change. It's essential for being able to see things from a different perspective. Can you connect with the part of you that is feeling more calm and more safe and more centered and more secure? Can you notice your nervous system slowing down, feeling centered and calm, and understanding that that's key to helping you shift, inviting in a calm nervous system, letting go, softening some of the hypervigilance, and just allowing yourself to not hold it all so tightly right in this moment. And pausing here for another moment to focus on things that replete you, remembering that it is hard to see things from a different perspective, shift course, and pivot from completely empty. And so what things in your life replete you? Might it be sunshine? Might it be fresh air? Might it be nature? Might it be a pet? Might it be a hug? Might it be a hot bath? Might it literally be a nap or sleeping? Noticing what repletes you, and perhaps setting an intention to do a little more of that. Noticing here in this moment the breath. Does breathing in and breathing out replete you? Does it give you a little more energy? Does it help? Noticing whether this pause, even a short pause, quiet and stillness, does that replete you? How might you incorporate more micro pauses into your day? And taking a moment to send yourself compassion and kindness, letting go with intention of judgment of your journey so far, remembering that they are also helpful for change. letting go of any judgment you might have about getting help. Getting help helps. Getting help is a sign of strength. Could you let go of any judgment around getting help? Could you perhaps set yourself up to support yourself well, to get help? What might that look like? Could you do that without any judgment? Noticing how you feel now, breathing in, breathing out, hand on heart. Noticing your nervous system, noticing potentially some spaciousness, noticing how you might feel centered and enjoying it. And when you're ready, you can lower your hands and open your eyes, gifting yourself some time to adapt, to transition well. And perhaps taking a few moments to write down what you learned, what helped. Might even a few mindful moments such as this throughout your day and your week be helpful. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you next week.